It's about to get real. Hey guys, it's Chengu from My Life After Breakfast, and I just wanted to tell you, one, I am super sorry if you hear any noise in the background. My dad is watching a movie downstairs and it's super loud. Attempts to get them to turn it down have been met with blank stares. So on to today's topic. Today we're talking about our first gross person of the weekend. His name is Arthur Shawcross. If you've ever lived in the New York State area, then you heard his name and you know how gross he is. But if you've never heard the whole story, here it goes. Arthur Shawcross was actually born in Maine in 1945, and very shortly thereafter he moved to Watertown, New York State with his parents. He was not that smart of a guy. As far as doctors were concerned, he was pretty much like borderline mentally retarded. And because he got so frustrated from not being as smart as people around him, he started bullying people. He got really angry, and that causes bedwetting in certain people. And he was just generally a very physically violent person. He dropped out of school in 1960 when he was 15. Then he was drafted into the army in 1967 at the age of 22. He was already married by that point, so he divorced his wife and gave up rights to his 18-month-old son. Don't know why. Most people just have their family like wait for them afterward. Maybe he just really didn't care about them and he was just off to the army and didn't care. So he went off to Vietnam, served his tour. When he came back in 1968, he got married again and he was stationed in Fort Hill, Oklahoma as an armorer, which is basically a handyman on army bases. He had always been a violent person, but it was his second wife who really remembers seeing his disturbing behavior. Like at one point they had a puppy which he, in a fit of anger, threw against the wall and killed. And he also had a penchant for starting fires, and she went to an army psychiatrist to figure out what the crap that was about. And he was pretty sure that her husband was getting sexual pleasure out of setting the fires. And since I didn't mention it in the video from before, when they look at the history of killers, setting fires is usually in the history of psychopaths and sociopaths. 1 year later, in 1969, he got an honorable discharge from the army and moved his wife to upstate New York. Almost as soon as he moved, he actually started setting fires like around town, which when you do it in your own house, it's just setting fires. When you do it around town, it's called arson. And he also started stealing things. They found out that he was doing all those things. He was arrested and he was sentenced to 5 years in Attica. He actually only served about 22 months, just short of 2 out of the 5 years, and was paroled in 1977. Since his second wife divorced him soon after moving into New York State, as soon as he got out of Attica, he married again. And after marrying his third wife, his crimes took a drastic escalation. It was at this point that he raped and murdered a 10-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl. Again, he was not that smart, so they found him pretty quickly, but they couldn't find the boy's body. So in exchange for a lowering of charges, he told them where the little boy's body was, and then he took manslaughter on the girl, and the boy's charges were completely dropped. So then he was sentenced to jail for 25 years. He actually only served 14 and a half years before he was paroled again in 1987. However, because this time he was also on the sex offenders list, every single time people he was around would find out what he did, they would run him out of town, they would run him out of his jobs, and he kept having to hop around. And while no parole officer wants to have to deal with moving a person around constantly, what this guy did to guarantee that he didn't have to do that anymore was flat out dishonorable. I hope he was fired. Arthur Shawcross's parole officer moved him and another sex offender into Rochester. If you know anything about the sex offender list in the United States, as soon as you are on it, if you move into a new neighborhood, your presence has to be announced to people who are around you. This parole officer didn't announce it to anyone because he didn't want to have to move him anymore. So now they just have this wolf among sheep and nobody knows he's there, and this is when his crimes escalate even higher. It was in the spring of 1989 when the police officers around Rochester were surprised to find that all of a sudden prostitutes were being found murdered. And not only was he killing these poor women, but he was also returning the bodies, desecrating them, and eating little pieces of them, getting some kind of perverse pleasure out of the amount of control he had over these bodies. And these murders went on for almost 2 years before they caught him. Now, as I said before, Arthur Shawcross was not exactly, the brightest crayon in the box. They should have found out who he was immediately. And they did do a search for any, sex offenders or criminals in the area, except his parole officer did not announce his arrival. So they had no idea that there was anyone that dangerous in their area. So they had no idea where to look. These murders were going on for almost 2 years and they had absolutely no leads. But by some stroke of luck, while they were searching for more bodies, because they had a whole bunch of missing women and they didn't know where all of them were, so they just kept searching day and night. Like New Year's Eve they were out there, Christmas Day they were out there, every single available second they were out there looking for new women so they could lay them to rest and get them out of these guys' hands. So in a stroke of luck, during that search, they found a body that he hadn't come back to yet, and he had yet to do that. So they watched the area, they had surveillance going on all over the place, and he came back and it was just him peeing on the river. But they knew that's what the body was, and they knew that is a kind of action that somebody who wants control over whatever is down there would do. So upon seeing him commit this action, they brought him into custody and questioned him. He confessed while in custody. They arrested him for the crimes and put him on trial. So although he had killed 12 women, for some reason one woman was dropped off the list. I don't know exactly what happened, but he was never actually tried for her murder. There were 10 other murders in one specific county and one in the other. So he was tried first for the 10, and he said the reason why he did this was because he had post-traumatic stress disorder, which has caused people to kill if they felt threatened in some way. So someone from the FBI, someone specializing in criminal behavior, sat down and talked to him to find out if he really had PTSD. And Shawcross told this huge story about this time when he was in the army and he was out in the jungle and someone tried to skin him alive and he just barely got away, and that's the reason why he killed all these people. And the FBI agent was like, well, that's hogwash. So that whole PTSD thing was just thrown right out. Yes! So, he was not given any sort of lighter sentence or any sort of deal. He was straight up tried for those 10 murders in that one county, and he got 250 years to life in prison. And for all the people who always wonder, you know, why do they do that? 250 years, 450 years, I've even heard 1,000 years. What they're saying is, you killed 10 people, we want you to get 25 years to life for each and every single one of them. So justice is done across the board. And a few months later, he was tried in the other county with just the one victim, and he was given life in prison for her murder as well. So he was carted off to jail, and he was there until November 10th, 2008, when he suddenly told officials that he had a pain in his leg. He was rushed to the hospital, and he had a cardiac arrest while he was there and died. So, I have one kind of hard question for you guys. Whose fault do you really think this is? One, yeah, it could be Arthur Shawcross. He made a choice, he made a decision, but it could also be the system. He was obviously in and out of trouble his entire life, had pretty much all the possible signs for a future serial killer, and no one said anything. So it could be the system, or is it his parole officer's fault? Should he have kept a closer eye on him? Should he have made the decision not to move him in the dark of night and not put him in there in secret? Do you think that had he told people that were around, they could have figured out what kind of man he was turning into after or possibly before the first murder, rather than after the 12th? What do you think? Arthur's fault, the system's fault, or the parole officer's? Comment below. Don't worry guys, I have one more day of gross stuff tomorrow, and then it's lighthearted stuff mostly next week. And then I've got other stuff coming for you next year on this channel and my other channel. I just really wanted to reconnect with you guys. What's up? Alright, so it's 2 more days until you see my punishment, which I'm sure you're really looking forward to, and me, not so much. So please remember to like and favorite and subscribe so you can see that punishment, because you guys are like super creative. So I absolutely love you guys. My scoops are beautiful, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.